to Sagas and Sass Season 2. I'm Tara, along with my fellow host Jonathan, and we are bringing back our special guest Seth tonight. This episode will cover League of Dragons, the ninth and final, thank God, book in Naomi Novik's Temeraire series.
If you're watching live, join us in the chat, or after the fact, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Sagas and Sass to continue the conversation.
And just a reminder, the views expressed in this show are those of the hosts as individuals and do not necessarily represent, everyone else present on this recording.
Not surprisingly, League of Dragons opens with Napoleon retreating from his defeat in Russia. But despite Lawrence and Temeraire's thinking they're on their way to actually capturing good old Nappy, all they end up with is some treasure, which is great for their finances, but unfortunately meant we as readers were in for one last long haul. But hey, at least it's the last one, right? Right? Not that they go herring off after Napoleon right away. Oh no, first Lawrence has to play politician in Russia for a while, which somehow leads to him getting into a fight with a drunk dude who goes off about wishing all dragons had died in the plague. They fight a duel, which is strictly forbidden for members of the Area Corps, but Lawrence... sorry. We went the wrong way.
Okay.
He's going to do what he's going to do. So he's injured because the other guy shoots early, and Hammond steps in as his second and almost kills the other guy. And then they have to convalesce together in a little farmhouse. And there's a pretty young daughter and a lot of dumb back and forth where the mother is trying to marry her daughter off to, honestly, none of this matters, and why is it even part of the book? No, but seriously, the only thing that actually happens during the whole side plot is that some pharaohs Temeraire essentially hired to get news to the captive Prussian dragons that their captains are free, show up with, well, all the Prussian dragons. So that's a pretty big win and all, until one of the dragons tells Temeraire that the French are planning to steal his and Skirka's egg from China. And thus begins pointless storyline number 2, in which Temeraire rushes off toward China to make sure the egg is safe, only for Tharky to catch up with him and tell him that it's already been taken, which means, welp, they're off to France instead. They meet up with Granby and Skirka along the way, because of course Skirka wasn't going to just wait around to find out what happened. Unfortunately, they fly right into a trap, but a convenient one, because they are brought to a huge covert where they discover that Napoleon is incubating thousands of dragon eggs and trying to set up a concord between them, like all the world's dragons, and providing them with the plague cure and granting them the rights and privileges that many countries have denied them.
So, Temeraire and Skirka plot to take back their egg, knowing they'll have to leave Lawrence and Granby behind, only there's a big kerfluffle sort of thing, and also the egg hatches in the midst of it all, and it turns out that the dragonette, who calls herself Ning, does have both the Define Wind and fire breathing, and she sets fire to the palace where Lawrence and Granby are being kept. So they get their captains out anyway, and next thing we know, everyone is back in England, where Lawrence and Jane make up. Lawrence is made into an admiral. Oh my gosh, an admiral. Oh, I can talk. So they get their captains out anyway, and next thing we know, everyone is back in England, where Lawrence and Jane make up. Lawrence is made into an admiral, and Temeraire and Priscidia draw up a Dragon Rights Act. Anyway, of course, that's not the end, because Napoleon is still doing his thing on the continent. So that's where Lawrence and Temeraire go, where they take back Berlin and then have to go help out in Dresden, all the while dealing with a couple of captains who still act like Lawrence did something wrong by bringing the cure to Napoleon like 8,000 books ago. And these captains do his best to defy Lawrence's orders, until Lawrence starts divvying out prize money to the dragons based on whether or not they're, following orders, at which point the dragons kind of go under their captain's, orders, which is fun. Meanwhile, help from the Chinese legions is delayed because they're being harried by ferals the whole way. Ferals who have chosen to trust in Napoleon's concord, that is. And somehow the British, Prussian, Russian coalition's first thought is to poison all the dragons? Seriously, again? What is wrong with these people? Thankfully, this time, they don't get a chance to go through with anything so absolutely over-the-top ridiculous. Lawrence gets super mad that they're even considering it, but because this book has already dragged on for like several hundred pages or something, we don't have to suffer through whatever he says or does to convince the coalition to basically put him in charge of everything. Suffice it to say, he and Temeraire are put in charge of convincing ferals to work with them instead of Napoleon, and it seems like some of the Chinese dragons arrive in time to help, and they defeat Napoleon, and he's captured. Except it turns out that the only reason he's actually captured is that he's basically abandoned by half of his supposed allies. First, the Tswana change sides, or maybe rather just decide to help the coalition defeat Napoleon because they don't trust any of these Europeans, and for damn good reason. And then the Incan dragons just turn tail and run because LOL, the Empress, Napoleon's wife, straight up betrays him. So Napoleon and Leanne are sent off to an island prison, and that's actually not Elba, I don't think, which is interesting and weird, but I guess that was too close to the coast. Anyway, we'll get into that. And Napoleon's son is eventually going to rule France with the Incan Empress acting as regent until he comes of age. As for Temeraire and Esquirca's daughter, Ning, while she was previously and maddeningly undecided as to which side she would choose or who she wanted to be her companion, she finally makes up her mind to go to China and be with the emperor, at least for now. And then there's Lawrence and Temeraire, who return to England, where Tharke has finally won his lawsuit against his jerk family members who are trying to keep him from his inheritance, and is therefore able to offer his lands as a base for Temeraire so that he can take up one of the new dragon seats in Parliament. And that, y'all, is the fucking end of this series. Thank God. Again. Okay. Wow. Wow. What even was the plot of this book? Random things happen one after another, and sometimes there are battles before Napoleon is finally caught, but he's only caught because he was betrayed. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Because
So never in the annals of fantasy literature has so much time been invested in such a mediocre series.
That's definitely not true.
But
well, at least not by this reader. I don't know what the plot of the last book is. They could have wrapped it up at the end of the previous book and added 3 chapters and been done. I found even the end was not fulfilling to me. I did sort of like the betrayal. That was sort of a neat twist, but for the most part, it was like, how do I bring it to as close to the end of the Napoleon's run as emperor as my series will allow when I compare it to real history, and at the same time make some minor changes to history with dragons. And instead of the dragons taking over the world, which I fully expected earlier in this series, they're settling for a couple of measly seats in Parliament. I just don't get it.
Isn't there a suggestion at the again? It's been a couple of years since I read it, and I only read it once. Isn't there a suggestion at the end that the dragon's power in Parliament is going to increase substantially in a few years? Or am I wrong? I just remember getting to the end of that and wondering if there is a book somewhere that Naomi Novik has titled Temeraire Prime Minister, and we're just not getting that.
It's so not really, because the whole point, or the whole thing where Tharke offers to let Lawrence and Temeraire come live on his land is because what they did when they gerrymandered. Yeah. They took areas of the country and said dragons can have seats from these areas, and they're all middle of nowhere. It's very, yeah. Temeraire takes they go live with Tharke, and Temeraire is going to take that seat in Parliament, so that there's actual representation outside of, I guess, maybe some ferals or dragons from breeding grounds who don't really give a crap. And so I think the only, thing about a possible future where they have more power is that Temeraire at least is going to be part of it, and he ain't gonna shut up, because he's Temeraire. But yeah, no, it's they gerrymandered the Parliament seats that I don't know if it's called the same thing in England, but that's what I'm calling it because that's what it is here.
Well, they didn't have Elbridge Gerry in England, but they did have a thing called a rotten borough, which is basically yes, this place has a seat in Parliament. There are 3 votes for the person who gets to be in Parliament to represent this area. So
yeah. So different, I guess name or whatever, but same thing. And so I don't remember, honestly, even though I literally just finished this book, I think Sunday night. I think it was Sunday night. I don't quite remember if there was any sort of hint that there were, or even talk that they would eventually get more seats. But for now, it's like, they're just going to have to fight, to get dragons who actually give a crap in the ones that exist as is. So okay. We'll get more into the ending in a little bit. I feel as if maybe the author wanted this series to end, but she didn't really know how to get to her desired ending. Or maybe her publisher told her, like, dude, these books have dragged on too long. Who knows? Whatever it is.
Would you say, Tara, that the books have dragged on too long?
But
yes,
I would. I mean, listen, like the travelogue thing that we've had going on this entire series, I get that. I think that these books could have just each been shorter, and then the last, like the previous book, they could have completely done away with the amnesia thing, had them just go back to China, have to go, do the whole thing with the rebellion, the White Rose Rebellion White Lotus Rebellion, and then ended up in Russia, had a quick little shindig in Russia. Like maybe this last book would have had to be longer, but all the other books could have been shorter. Maybe not combined, because, each had its own story in a different place for the most part, but I don't know. I mean, I'm very torn as to whether or not, like, I would love to know, honestly, and not that I don't think that Naomi Novik would ever actually admit it either way, but like, did she just want the series to end and kind of rush through it because of that? Did her publisher tell her it needed to end, and so she rushed through it because of that? Or I don't know, like did she just, and then there's the whole, well, maybe it's not just this book that's a problem, but like in this book, it's like extra problematic. The last two books were just a fucking hodgepodge of nonsense, right? This one, though, however, was just the worst, because what did she just want to cram in, like a little side trip to Lithuania, PSY, a random encounter with a Bengalese dragon, among other things? Like, she's just like, oh, but these are things I wanted in my series, so I'm going to cram them in here real quick. And, oh, I'm out of time. So here you go. Here's the end.
I mean, maybe. Well, let me put it to you this way. Would you rather have an author who finishes a series and crams a bunch of stuff they felt like cramming into the series, or would you rather have an author who keeps cramming stuff into a series and doesn't finish that series?
Are you talking about Martin or Jordan here?
I'm not mentioning names.
Or Rothfuss, even.
Oh, Patrick Rothfuss, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously you can get people who, who have a nice balance of stuff they wanted to put in the story. I mean, but like, even like, it's hard for me to blame her, because even Tolkien, like, what's Tom Bombadil doing? What's he doing? He's hanging out. He's hanging out to be a Deus Ex Machina for the Hobbits twice.
Although I will say this, I've only read Lord of the Rings 3 times. I know, sue me.
That's 2 more times than I've read it.
But the most recent time was this summer, and I had not liked, like, I hated Tom Bombadil. I was like, this is stupid. Why is this here? They didn't need this. This is nonsense. Freaking loved him. Like, could not remember why I didn't like him at all on my most recent reread. So,
oh yeah, I like him. I just realized that he doesn't. He still doesn't make a whole lot of narrative sense. But
no, he doesn't. That's why he wasn't in the movies. Let's
never going to turn down Old Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadil.
Although you will never, ever, ever eke those words out of a rabid Tolkien fan, let me tell you. Like, it might be true, but they would never say it. Or they'll just give you 8,000 excuses. But I mean, anyway, I think that, I don't know, like, what the absolute fuck was up with the little soap opera in the farmhouse with the pretty young woman? Like, what was that? What was that?
That sounds weird, but that might be a war novel convention that for some reason she thought she had to add. Like the convalescing soldier falls in love with a woman who's nursing him is like,
except no one, like, that's not what it was at all. It was literally like this mother was like,
it was the opposite.
Yeah, my daughter's. Yeah, was she trying to destroy a trope? But just it fit in so badly with everything. It was just like it just didn't. There was no reason. There was no reason for it.
Well, I actually thought it was the opposite trope. It was the desperate peasant trying to marry her daughter off to a better life, presumably.
I think that's that. I mean, that absolutely was exactly what it was. I mean, I think it was Lawrence was like, this is obviously what's happening. And that's basically what he said. But why there was like, nothing came of it. Right. Like this girl, it was let's call her Miss M, because I can't remember her whole last name, but I know it started with an M. Miss M was, this pretty woman, and it was between, it was between like Iskerka, I think. The dragons were all like trying to like finagle her into marrying one of their crew members, right? And then there was the douchebag Russian guy who was like, he was trying to basically make her, like his kept woman. And Lawrence is over here just like, Jesus Christ, when will this be over? Get us out of here. Like, please, dear God, let me out of this hell. And that was probably the funniest part of it, was just Lawrence just realizing how stupid and ridiculous it all was. And in the end, she marries the Prussian guy, Dryhern.
Yeah.
But there's like a very brief mention of her kind of toward the end of the book about her being married to Dryhern, and that's it. Like, there's nothing comes of it. And I think was Turkey also involved, but Hammond was like, yeah, no, man, I'm trying to get myself a rich girl.
Yeah, Hammond had nothing to do with it. He needed to marry up.
Yeah, the whole thing was just like, why? It was a waste. It was a waste of pages in a book that just toward the end, because it wasted pages on bullshit like this. Also, I saw this like kind of reference in one of the reviews I read, and I thought it was funny because someone, that jerk Russian guy who Lawrence dueled, clearly hasn't heard 10 Duel Commandments. Like, I was like, oh, good one. You're right. He absolutely hadn't, because he shot at 2, and he was like, I was nervous. Yeah, sure you were, asshole. Maybe he didn't expect Hammond to step up, which also, listen, I dislike Hammond most of the time. He annoys the shit out of me, but the fact that he like stepped up and like almost killed this guy as Lawrence's second was like, whoa, okay then. All right. I got you, man. I got you. Didn't even have to shoot early. And the guy lives. I don't know, the whole thing. Do any of us think that it belonged in this book? Really belonged, needed to be there for any reason other than the author fulfilling some weird fantasy?
I don't even think the duel needed to be there. I mean, that whole plot line was superfluous to what was going on.
Nothing ever came of it. The Aerial Corps members are specifically told they're banned from dueling.
Yeah, but no consequences came of it either. So it's like
exactly.
Other than
I mean, that's a that's a thing where people,
other than Roland, like giving Roland Jr., that is.
Yeah, I mean, really, nothing happened. Like,
I believe
literally
Roland
nothing.
Jr. We named the dog India. Anyway,
There were no consequences for the duel. Like there was no point to the whole soap opera, who's marrying the pretty peasant girl storyline. There was just sometimes I feel like Naomi Novik wrote these books hoping they would be turned into a TV show. And like if this was a TV show, this whole little soap opera plot line in this book would probably draw this book out into like 3 seasons, and there would be something that came of it in the end. Maybe I don't know.
Frankly, I'm actually kind of surprised that these haven't been optioned, given the way things are going these days.
There are a lot of better books that have not been optioned yet. Can we please at least get them?
Yeah, well, really what I think it is if it was going to be live action, because the dragons are so prevalent, the CG would have to be like Game of Thrones level dragon CG. And for the longest time, that didn't even exist, right? That's only kind of been a possibility for the last few years.
It's expensive.
So yeah, like if you look, I know that they made one of the Aragon books into a movie, and I watched it, and I was like, and I've seen other movies where dragons were there and they talked and everything, but none of them were that good at all. In fact, they were bad, and I would never watch a lot of it. And
Dragonheart was a great movie. It just didn't have great special effects.
Well, yeah.
There were some other
problems. So, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if this got optioned like eventually. I think but it would be so costly. It would be so costly to make, even now. So,
but it also just seems like they're looking for stuff that's going to go on for a while. I realize we are straying from the point, but just like stuff like, for example, Amazon's like, we're going to produce the Wheel of Time. And it's like, are you though? Like that you just made a 14 season commitment if you think you're going to get through the whole thing. Honestly, yeah. I hope it's not 14 seasons. I hope they look at some of the books and go, we don't need to do full seasons for these books.
I suspect that's what they're going to do. And I mean, they saved The Expanse only to end The Expanse early, so I haven't figured that one out yet either. So,
have you read all the books though?
No,
I've read all of them except the last one.
Yes,
and which just came out yesterday.
Yes,
yeah.
And, my wife beat me to it, so she's reading it now. But
yeah, I kind of the last. So there's 9 books total, right? Yeah. I have not read book 8. Because book 7 was like, ugh. Or maybe it was like portions of or all of the last couple books. I was like, this is dragged on too long, and I'm over it.
Oh, really? I've loved them.
I really, really, really loved like the first 5 or 6 of them. And so but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like if this were ever to be made, and we're still kind of off topic when we'll get back on it in a minute, but if this were ever to be made into a TV show, they would absolutely have to combine things. And I mean, but that's the thing, they could. There's like, again, we keep talking about these travel logs and like, why is the amnesia plotline even there? Did we actually need to see the dragons in Japan? Like, he met that American dragon, and literally nothing came of that either.
John Wampanoag?
Yeah,
John Wampanoag's one of my favorite characters in the whole series.
He's great, but did he need to go to Japan and have amnesia to meet him?
Yeah, I don't know.
And then we never saw John Wampanoag again, or any relevance to that whole.
No, it's a shame. But you did get to see that giant kaiju dragon.
Yes.
Yeah, but again, it was just. Did that even? And okay, so speaking of John Wampanoag, a review that I saw noted that early in this book, it being the Tsar's birthday, puts this happening in December 1812. I'm not quite sure. They didn't really go into detail about how or why, because I don't remember if the Tsar, it was said like the Tsar is like exactly this old or whatever, but the person seemed very sure, the person writing this review, that it being the Tsar's birthday meant that it was December 1812. So what happened to like what's going on with the entire War of 1812? Like maybe this person was wrong about
it didn't happen in this universe.
Right. Or so and again, this person could have been wrong about the timing because we haven't gotten any of the it's the year XX notes in this, it's the year 6, it's the year 8 in this particular book, or even the book before that I recall. Whatever. Well, I'm not mad that we didn't go to America because like we visited quote unquote so many other awesome places in this series, and sure America isn't that great anyway, we all know this. I'm just mad about the fact that I was wrong about whether or not we would see it. Like I guess I should have kind of thought forward and been like, wait, Napoleon's not captured yet and we only have so long to get him. But I really just kind of expected like he's screwed the war, in Europe because of the Russia thing, the winter and everything. Maybe they'll just catch him at the very beginning and then we go to America. But I was wrong about them ever going to America, and I'm mad about that.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be mad about being wrong.
That's okay. Returning to quickly to an earlier off-topic topic. The Expanse book 8 was actually the one that I read it and I went, you know what? Shoot. Because I was like, these books are fun. I'm going to read them once and then never again. And then I read book 8 and I'm like, nope, got to read them again. So I had to repurchase all of the Expanse books. But anyway, yeah. Okay, so this is kind of a hodgepodge, and maybe it is maybe the books were, I have no idea how these books sold, like how well they sold. But I mean, the fact that she published 9 of them indicates that she had built something of an audience, right? You don't from what I hear, it's if you don't hit by the 3rd book, that's pretty much the end of your career. So she wrote 9. It may be that she was actually rushed, that the publisher was like, you know what, we're not, like the sales for the last 3 books have dragged, we're not going to be able to publish a 10th one. And she's just like, well, I had all these ideas, I wanted to get into it, so here we go.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think you're giving her too much credit. I think
I am basing this on her later writing.
But the whole series was a series of these travelogues and pointless episodes in the middle of a plot line. I mean that didn't have any payback later. So,
I still found it to be entertaining. Like I remember being entertained by the series, and also their books are not long.
No, they're not. And I mean, I guess there's like, if I was to say that an entire book in this series needed to be thrown out, it would be the one where they're in Australia, because nothing comes of that.
That was sort of just the adventures of Lawrence and Temeraire in Australia.
Yeah. Like literally, they don't go back to their valley at the end. They don't. It didn't need to be there. That entire book didn't need to be there. Also, almost every single one of these books could have been anywhere from 50 to 150 pages shorter.
But I mean, so going back to the Australia book, the most interesting piece of the Australia book was that concept of the long-range freight dragon,
right?
That never was mentioned again. So she introduced these. She spent a bunch of time introducing a bunch of concepts into the story that she then proceeded to completely ignore and had no payoff whatsoever.
And it wasn't even like red herring stuff, where it's just taking your attention away from something else. It was literally just, this is a cool concept and I like it and I'm interested in it. And then guess what? You're never going to see anything about it ever again.
I mean, the whole freight thing and then John Wampanoag, I mean, I actually thought it was going somewhere where at the end of this series was going to either be, at one point I thought, again, the dragons taking over the world, and then at least then coming to the dragons completely dominating world commerce. But it was neither of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the book of short stories will wrap things up and answer questions and reintroduce. I know John Wampanoag's in one of them.
Yeah, well, and he's like briefly mentioned, like in what was the last one? Crucible of Gold? No, the last one was shoot, sorry, Blood of Tyrants. The last one was Blood of Tyrants, and he's like mentioned because they talked to some other they talked to an American, and I guess they're maybe trying to get this American to do something for them or help them. I don't know. And it's like, oh, well, John Wampanoag. So, but like nothing really ever comes of that. And then there's in League of Dragons, when they go to Dresden and the entire city is on fire, right? Like they get there and the entire city is on fire, and they're saying, I don't think this could be just because of this, like this one flamme de gloire, this one fire breathing French dragon absolutely didn't do this. And there's this whole thing where, there's this whole bunch of dragons that are flying above the city with like pots and stuff. Like they're trying to set the city on fire. Yeah. And one of the
World War II firebombing.
Yeah, and one of the Temeraire's new lieutenant, the woman, Challoner, I'm guessing, I don't know. She says like,
how do you spell her name?
Challloner, but she's British.
Yeah.
So she's a new lieutenant. She's one of Temerair's newer crew members. And she says, I've been to the colonies, and while I wouldn't swear to it, those green ones on the left flank there have the look of Niscapi beasts. Those are the natives up north of Halifax. And Forthing says, what, Indians here? How should they get here, and why would they? And so there's this whole thing where, they're basically the ones who have burned, we're assuming that these are North American, not they're north of Halifax, so Canadian, but still North American dragons, and they're burning this city, Dresden in Germany, and that's it. That's it. They never come up again. They're never mentioned again. They're never mentioned before this. I don't believe there was any mention of Temeraire or Granby or anybody picking them out from all of the dragons that were there for the Concord in, wherever they were, in Temeraire when they were all prisoner. Why? Like I think I bent my book in anger at this point, because I was so easily able to open to this passage. It's like I didn't fold the page. I just got so angry I almost cracked the spine of this little book, because why were there North American dragons there, and why were they never mentioned before this, and they were never mentioned after this? Whatever.
I don't know.
It's maddening. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of absolute nonsense in this book.
Yeah. Well, it also is to bring up something you said before. It is interesting that given Naomi Novik's rewriting of history where she can, erasing as much colonialism as she can, the fact that she's an American author and she didn't go to America. She didn't go to the States or whatever it is in this. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that, if I could, I'd rewrite. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It does seem like there's more she could do with it if she wanted to do more with it. But I'm, definitely getting the sense that.
Well, she's writing another series, so at least for the moment, I don't think she's coming back to this world anytime soon.
She's writing.
I don't know if I have any desire to try her new series. One. There's a lot I want to read, and I don't think that's one of them.
Yeah, I mean,
if you haven't read Uprooted and Streams of Silver or Spinning Silver, they're very different than the Temeraire books.
They're better?
Yes.
Well, and here's the thing, like the feeling that I got, and this is kind of jumping forward a little bit and things I want to talk about. The feeling that I got from her writing in these books is that she was trying too hard to be historically accurate in like the manners of speaking and, you know, certain other things. But like and her character developed Hammond was maddening and didn't really change or make me like him. Lauren, same thing. You know, Granby was a good character, but also didn't have a ton of character growth, but he was kind of background. Like she wrote some, like a couple, you know, fun, like characters. I mean, I loved Emily. I thought Domain was great. You know, I like Jane a lot. But we've lost Jonathan.
You lost Jonathan, yeah.
That's okay. I'm sure he'll be back.
He disliked the series so much he just pieced out of the discussion.
But the biggest thing for me was that, you know, the dragons were great.
Oh, yeah.
I loved the dragons. I loved, oh my gosh, like I love Temeraire. Who doesn't love Temeraire? I would absolutely put him, I think, behind probably Toothless is what I said a couple episodes ago as like one of my top like favorite, you know, dragons of all time.
Yeah. My problem is that when presented with the opportunity, I usually go full Elmira on stuff. So just like, yeah, cute, gimme. I'd be like,
I love Askirka. She's crazy and maddening, and I love her. I really enjoyed Turkey a lot. And I like the fact, and this was something that I absolutely wanted to touch on, is how, well, first of all, like just LOL at the end about how I think she writes to Temeraire and she's bragging about all of Hammond's family members and like even his most distant cousins and like cousins' babies are hers. And, you know, it's cute. And I like how the entire experience with the Ink and Dragons family, you know, ideas of the family unit, the Ialu or Isla, I can't remember if it was Ialu or Isla, made, you know, these other dragons that spent time with them and connected with them, you know, consider not just their crews, but also the families of their crews who they'd never met.
Yeah.
Because at the end, toward the end, Temeraire it's that almost brand new Lieutenant Challoner, the woman, has like a family and stuff. And he's like, oh, well, what would I tell her family if something happened to her? And he's so worried about being involved in not just his immediate crew, but like their extended families. And it's like, that's nice. Like it's nice that change, you know, happened based on their experiences with the Ink and Dragons and with Turkey mostly, you know, in particular, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's also cute that the dragons hoard not only gold, but humans.
Yeah. Well, cute.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's cuter than eating them.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but why would you choose to eat humans when you have good juicy cows and good Chinese food to eat?
Yeah. Although they don't all love those porridge pits or whatever. Well, speaking of them hoarding gold, though, so that brings us back to something we mentioned in the summary, which was when Lawrence is saddled with these, I mean, and the Aero Corps specifically saddles him with commanders who they know are going to balk at his orders and give him trouble, right? Which is like, why give this guy an admiralty if you're gonna then, you know, make it so difficult for him? Like, just I don't know. It seems very backwards and stupid to me, but whatever. So they
I didn't understand. Unless they were actually trying to lose the war, I didn't quite understand that.
Right,
at all.
Exactly. And I think, I guess maybe part of their thought process was that they would stop Lawrence from doing anything really ridiculous, which is hilarious because like in the end they still weren't able to do that. But like I guess like they saddled him with these guys, right? And he has trouble with them. And then he planned for it ahead of time, right? He planned for it ahead of time because he knew that the commissariat was just kind of like taking things under the table and stuff. So he made this whole deal with the commissariat people, and also, they took the wagon train that just had a bunch of shitty dried meat or something on it, and basically it was this whole, okay, well, you took this prize and this is how much it's worth, and you get this many shares based on what you did, and he's handing out shares to all these dragons, like you get this 4 shares, let's say, for just participating. But all these other dragons who, paid attention to the signal flags, they get more shares. And this dragon who, led the column gets, even more shares and stuff. And it's like the dragons that were held back by their captains and were kind of like basically told to disobey or ignore orders that they were being given by Lawrence and Temeraire, they lost out on their shares of that prize. And they built it up to this whole accounting system where they had the tallies, and the dragons were making them like write out the tallies, and like they had to hire what's her name, the tutor, to like write them out, and then she was having to copy them so many times that she had to start charging a shilling to make copies. Like it was just, and the dragons could do the math. They did the math all on their own, but they wanted to see it written on paper, right? That whole thing was just absolutely hilarious to me. And even more hilarious was the fact that it led to, I can't remember their names, Fidelitas and Obiscaria, something like that. Like their 2 captains were the worst. Poole and the other guy's name started with a W. Their 2 captains were the worst about disobeying Lawrence's and Temeraire's kind of orders or whatever, the order of battle. And it led to those dragons getting kind of pissed off at their captains. And they're like, the one, I think it's Fidelitas, like drags his captain in and like tucks him under his leg and is like, shut up, man. Like he doesn't say it that way, but it's that it balked the whole idea, right? That the dragons are so attached to their captains that nothing can sway them, even if their captains are total assholes. And it almost like, it takes me back to Rankin and his first dragon, whose name I can't remember. Levitas.
Yeah, Levitas.
Levitas, who died. And it's like, man, if only, if only he had been shown that there is absolutely, something worth kind of, and I granted part of it, I think, was also that the dragons understood that they weren't doing what they were supposed to do in terms of the battle formations and everything, like they knew they were disobeying their commander essentially.
And they knew it didn't serve for a purpose.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they're smart enough to know tactics in battle, and they're like, what the hell is he doing? Why are we...
So that was definitely...
I mean, it wasn't like Lawrence was giving orders that made 0 sense whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It was like we're trying to win the battle. What the hell is my captain doing here, sending me off to screw up my wingman, right? I mean...
Right. And but it was just really amusing to me that Lawrence had this whole plan set in place like beforehand, just to... Well, hey, if it gets really bad, I can always just start paying the dragons based on how well they do. And then maybe the dragons will come to their senses and listen to us and not their captains necessarily. It was, honestly, I was proud of Lawrence a little bit in that moment, because he was all like, oh, I don't know, it's a little bit underhanded. Like, he wasn't too happy about what he was doing. But who cares, man? Like, you're fine, Lawrence. You're fine.
No.
And Seth, I don't know. Do you remember what we're talking about?
Vaguely. Vaguely. I mean, it happens. You know, if I've only read the book once, like I'll be able to tell you general plot outline, but the details are a little bit. But I mean, that sounds right. Like, and I've read enough Napoleonic fiction, by which I mean the Sharp series, that it's like, yeah, there's always somebody who thinks they're of higher status or is looking to get a promotion, who is like, I'm going to do poorly in this battle so that the guy who's leading it loses, and then I'll get the promotion or whatever it is. Which is a dumb thing to do, because what you're betting on is that you're not going to lose badly enough to get killed, and that you won't lose badly enough to lose the war. So
I think it was stupid. It was stupid from the beginning that these captains are just so mad at Lawrence about, I don't know, like, listen, for sure, it sucks that Lawrence bringing them the cure meant that Napoleon was able to do everything that he's done since then. But also, you're killing a bunch. Plague warfare is not good, assholes.
Well, yeah, it's like, whoa, Lawrence, you ruined our strategy. Napoleon had the run of the continent for 2 more years. Our genocide of the dragons would have been perfectly reasonable.
And then they were gonna do it again.
Yeah,
and they were all like, because those same captains, even after everything, they like told their dragons, you gotta go guard Temeraire, and their dragons just kind of like did it. And only after the fact realized that, oh shit, like we were told to guard this dragon because they thought he was going to stop the coalition from poisoning a whole bunch of other
yeah.
And of course it all came to nothing. It's whatever. But I don't know. Maddening storylines. This whole book is just maddening storyline after maddening storyline. So I did love, outside of maddening storylines, I did love the random tidbit where Jane Rowland like enters society. Like Lawrence's mom helps her enter society because she's whatever she is now. She's a baroness or a duchess or something. And
yeah, I mean, she was raised to nobility because of her.
Right. It was during the when Napoleon invaded Britain or whatever, but like Lawrence's mom helps her out, and she has like this nice house, and she throws dinner parties, and it leads to these random young like women and girls who are part of the nobility. Younger daughters are just, I think she mentions like women who just don't want to be shoved into some bullshit marriage for money or whatever, joining the aerial corps because they, have dinner with Jane once or twice or whatever. That was a really cool, like, I like that.
Yeah, because she possesses a freedom that they can only dream of unless they're like, well, maybe I will fly a dragon too. Yeah.
Exactly. I loved it. It's like, it's this random little tidbit. It's one of the, listen, that if you're going to give me some like side story that doesn't actually come to anything, cough, cough, stupid soap opera with peasant daughter, that's what I would have preferred to see, is like Lawrence having to attend, one of those dinners or something like that, where he sees Jane working her magic and these girls like clamoring about joining the aerial corps. Like, that's what I want to see. Okay. Give me a side story about that. Not peasant daughter being married off to whoever.
Not the complications of the interracial relationship between Emily and Domain.
Well, I mean, that was basically
in the 1700s.
Yeah, that was basically an aside in this book too. Jane is like, well, I mean, he's a good guy, Domain. I would love to see Emily with him. And Lawrence is over here like, ooh, she's a lady now. She's like part of the nobility now. Like, it would have been bad before, but now it's like, even worse. But it doesn't matter because, listen, we never see Domain again. All we know is like,
we barely see Emily.
Yeah, we barely see Emily, and we never see Domain. All we know is like, Caligula is still out there being his best self. being a very good boy.
It's just it seems like for some stuff it got away from her a little bit. Like she had too many characters and too many plot threads to hang on to, so some of them just left, and we don't get to see what happens to them. An epilogue would have been nice, like the epilogue at the end of
I mean, it's interesting you say too many characters. I mean, I guess in some ways it was too many characters, but to me it was almost too few characters because you spent 90% of the time with Lawrence, and Lawrence isn't the most interesting person around.
Oh no, I mean, but sometimes that's what happens. If we're talking about Jordan again, I definitely feel that there was more of a shift from Rand to Matt in the back half of the series, because Rand is what's the best way to put this? Awful. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe we could have used some of Domain's perspective or whatever. It just wasn't one of those series. Like it was.
I mean, I
relatively
think we were
short
lucky
books
that we got Temeraire's perspective at some point, because that was the only thing that kept me going for a while. Is that good? We're getting Temeraire's perspective now, thank God.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, I wouldn't have expected there to be like more POV type situations. I don't know. I don't necessarily think there were too few characters in total. I think that there were just too few that made a difference, I guess. And in the end, even their little bit of making a difference was kind of like, it didn't really matter most times. We're never going to know what happened to Emily and Domain. We're never going to... 9 books of this shit.
There was no payoff for the people we met for the most part. I didn't even think there was much payoff for Gran being a Skirka, for that matter. I mean,
what happened to Granby's boyfriend? Little, where's he? We don't even know where he is.
So what the impression I'm getting is that it's not that the series went on too long necessarily, and it's not that she much of the wrong stuff in the books.
Repeat yourself. It's not that the series you froze for a second.
Oh, sorry. It's not that the series went on too long or that there was too much stuff in the last book. It's that there was too much of the wrong stuff in the series, and you wanted to see different things.
It's a bit of both. But
I would have liked. I personally would have liked to narrow the focus a bit to some of those side characters that we liked, but even some that we didn't like necessarily. But narrow the focus and have some payoff to the end of the series, and to have some growth and have some. Yeah. But it as I said, there was just not enough payoff for my personal taste. But she did write 9 books, so I'm sure that there was plenty of people who are sitting here listening to this podcast who are saying these people are idiots. We loved it.
I mean, it does hit a very particular sweet spot, right? If you're into Napoleonic adventure and dragons, this is the series for you.
Or even just
I have read
very like wannabe accurate historical fiction and dragon.
Yeah. No, so I have read a bunch of historical fiction that was historical science fiction, alternate history stuff, and I would not have considered this one of the better ones.
Yeah, I've read a lot of historical fiction, so I agree. I did like, I mean, it's little things like yay for the Tswana taking things in their own hands and being all just leave us the fuck alone, y'all. And I did like the whole like this is how dragons changed colonialism, aka it's colonialism and slavery, really.
Yeah.
Although we don't ever get into America, and that's just like freaking
Well-
like. So is there still slavery in America? Because the thing is, we don't know. They don't really ever talk about it. They talk about the slave trade between Africa and Brazil, between Africa and South America, but they don't ever Naomi Novik doesn't ever get into any of the slavery issues between with America. And that's kind of was like, so what's going on there? Like you nixed the whole slave trade. So, okay. But they had at some point, what was it? The compromise of, I can't remember the name of it, but the compromise where they weren't allowed to import any new slaves into America, like things like that. It's like, I don't know. There was a lot of time spent on things that sounded really cool and were actually really cool to read. Like I don't want to regret learning, or not learning, but reading about the differences between the dragons and the Incan dragons, the whole family thing with them, and everything. I don't know. Like there's a lot of things like that I enjoyed about the series, even if it did seem kind of pointless at times. But I just, there's so much that's just like, come on, man. Like,
I mean, the biggest change that this book has historically at the end, as we try to project out where the world is going, is you have essentially one group, one country in Latin America and one country in Africa, and that would make a huge difference. And neither of them controlled by European colonial powers, but one clearly allied with France as a colonial
Sort
power.
of.
So
Kind of, yeah.
Well, yes, no, allied now because they control it.
Right.
The
Yeah.
Indians now control France.
yeah, which could be worse off, I guess.
Now, what that means 100 years later, who the hell knows? But that's another series for another day. But
frankly, I wouldn't mind if she wanted to be like, well, what would this look like in the 20th century of this version of history? I'd probably read that book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd have to. Well, we need Harry Turtledove to write it because he does that sort of thing. But
I'm going to write a 5-book series about aliens, but actually, it's not the Prime Invasion. That's coming later.
You didn't like the World War series?
I did not. I did not enjoy it. I felt that most of the characterization was pretty flat, and that it felt like he was writing that series to set himself up for another series, which I very much dislike.
Well, I actually really liked the World War series. I must admit, I despised what happened after it with the colonization series that came later. But
all that aside, speaking of setting up for another series, in conclusion,
we get to read about another upper middle class British man.
Well, in conclusion, I mean, I feel like Naomi Novik left enough open ends. Emily and Domain, for instance, that's like the easiest one I'm coming up with. But also like the whole what's happening with dragons in Parliament and everything, to eventually write more in this world, but she hasn't to any extent that I know of yet. So like, and also just based on it all, I'm okay with leaving it where it is myself. I'm there are parts of the series that I actually really enjoyed. I would never put it in my top 10 book series for sure. But I really loved the dragons for the most part. I did love, seeing certain part, not all of them, but certain parts of the world. Like I said, I love the South American stuff. I love the African stuff. I even really like the Chinese stuff in book 2, but I don't, I guess like I got really tired, and in this book, especially for some reason, and it was really hard for me to finish this book. This is probably the first one since book 3, Black Powder War, that was actually difficult for me to finish in time, because I was just like, I'm tired of the stilted conversation and the attempts to be like, I'm writing, like Jane Austen. I This series had a lot of promise, and I think it did have some payoff in terms of how well the dragons were written, and certain things about the different parts of the world, and the breakdown, literal like breakdown by dragons or because of dragons, of slavery and everything. But my God, honestly, I'm glad it's over. 9 books is, I don't even want to say 9 books is too many, but for this series, it was too many.
I was going to say, but speaking of sagas, what about the other George R. R. Martin long-running series? Could always read the 24 Wildcards books.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Oh,
I could pretend like I cared, but
well, I was a Wildcards reader when they first came out, and I really enjoyed the first 6 books, except for Aces Abroad, which was terrible. But and after that, it slowly outwore its welcome, and I have not. I read it through the original 12 book series, and then read the 3-book new cycle, and haven't read any.
Sorry, you
since,
said
so.
you read the what, Jonathan?
So I'm about 9 books behind on that.
Yeah, I've been catching up. A lot of it became, look at the things that we're going to do to characters you like. And it's like, oh, wait, you learned the wrong lesson from Game of Thrones, George. Maybe we want some of these people to have happy endings.
Yeah, the
I'm
6th
not
book,
necessarily a big happy ending person, but I do agree that it gets very tiring when everything is bad all of the time.
Yeah.
I'm reading I'm rereading. Sorry, John, I keep interrupting. I'm rereading Storm of Swords right now, and I am struggling to finish it because it's like everything's bad all of the time, and I know it's only gonna get worse because I'm only halfway through right now.
Oh,
Sansa just married Tyrion.
You're not even there yet.
Yeah, exactly. Although, to be honest, I think the worst thing that happened in Storm of Swords was Sansa having to marry Tyrion.
Really?
It could have gone a lot worse for her.
It could have, but it bothers me on so many levels. Like the Red Wedding is like, to be honest, like it's really bad, but also there are a lot of dumb and had it coming. Like, why are you gonna go to Walder Frey and like just have your whole ass army there and lock your wolf outside in a pen and shit? Like, yeah, you kind of had it coming. Anyway, sorry, this is an entirely random aside that has nothing to do with Temeraire. Okay, so oh my gosh, we are done. We are done with the Temeraire series. Seth, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and for, I think it was Crucible of Gold was the last one you joined us for. That might have been the last one I'm on. That's yeah, I thank you so much for joining us for these, especially like very last minute. I hope you will be able to join us for our Christmas special where we talk about sex education.
Oh shoot! When are you recording that?
Wednesday, December 22nd.
Well,
we'll see. We'll
see. Yeah.
But hopefully we'll be able to get you onto some future episodes that aren't as last minute, and also not us just like, we're so glad we're done with this series. So I don't know. Okay, so
what are you reading next, or can you not say right now?
No, I can say. So our next series is going to be The Books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft.
Oh, okay.
It was actually a series. The first 2 books were self-published. Josiah is a friend, like he's a very close friend of one of my close friends. So I know him, but just as an acquaintance. So I read these books the first 2 books when they were self-published, and they're very, very good. He got picked up by Orbit. So the third book was published, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago. I think it was about a year and a half ago. And the 4th book just came out in November. So I'm really excited to cover these. It's very, very different from everything we've covered before. So that's our absolute very next series, which will start in January. But on that note, I do, before we totally close out the Temeraire series, Jonathan, what would you rate this series on a scale of 1 to 10?
Well, being that I actually read through the whole thing, it's clearly not a one. I would say this goes in the books of I will pretty much remember my entire life that I read them, and a year and a half from now, I remember nothing about them, other than the basic plot line of Dragons Napoleon. So
So
I
what
would
would you
say
rate them?
probably between a 4.5 and a 5.5, somewhere in, depending on my mood. Five is just too obvious, but
Yeah, yeah. Seth, I know it's been a little bit since you read them. What do you think you would have, or what would you rate this
Well,
series?
I have to go as far as a 7, and the reason I'm going for 7 is because in order to figure out in order to figure out what I might actually grade them as, I would need to read them again, and that prospect does not fill me with dread. So they must have been at least okay.
Yeah, I know that a solid 5 is like a eh. Um, God, I think that's what I have to go with though. Like I will never read these books again. I know I will never read
yeah.
these books again. And to be honest, I'm thinking about doing a giveaway because I have all 9 of them in paperback and I'm never going to read them again. And the ones I have are very lightly used. So it's like, yeah, maybe I should give away these 9 very lightly used books. And I don't know if I'll do a I don't know. Yeah, I'll probably just do a giveaway for season 2 because we did one for season 1. So I feel like I have to do one for season 2. Um, but yeah, it's to be honest, if it hadn't been for how just lovely like the dragons were and everything, and the things I liked about the different cultures and the just complete deconstruction of like slavery and colonialism, I would have rated this series like a 3.5 or maybe a 4. But the dragons and stuff gave it that extra oomph. So solid 5. It's not the worst thing I've ever read. I like Jonathan said, I did read them all. I did finish the series. I didn't super regret it until the last 2 books. Like the last 2 books were tough for me. So yeah, there's that. But it's done now. And on that note, once again, I'm Tara along with Jonathan and special guest Seth. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank everybody who's listening for joining us for Sagas and Sass. And we'll see you next time, which will hopefully be later this month, later in December, when we have our holiday special, which is a sassy and sexy holiday special about the Netflix TV show Sex Education, because it has nothing to do with the holidays, but we really thought that we deserved something super fun after this whole season, because Broken Earth was depressing, David wasn't much less depressing, and Temeraire was just rough at the end. So thank you guys for joining us and have a lovely evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.